Hey everyone, and welcome to Time Extend. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Adam Ismail, and I'm here with
Brendan Norrison, and today we won't be discussing the latest news in the racing game world, but we do have a featured topic.
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out a way to switch it up this week and also talk about something that wasn't just another Sega racer, and I think we figured it out because this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, but we really haven't given it the time of day on Time Extend at all. So this is going to be an in-depth and comprehensive ranking of all the core Ridge Racer games.
Woo!
Yeah, it's going to be a big topic too. If we tried to fit news in, the show would probably be 2 hours long at least. That's after we dug around for news to find worth talking about, which hasn't really been the case lately. But yeah, so what we decided to do was just figure out where all the Ridge Racer games, the console ones anyway, rank according to your humble co-hosts. And we had a couple rules for this going in. First off, no spin-offs, and those really only count Ridge Racer Unbounded and our Racing Evolution, which aren't really Ridge Racer games anyway, so I don't think anybody would have an issue with that. No mobile titles, because we don't care about them. And this one's unfortunate. I wish there was a way we could get around this, but no arcade-only entries, which means that, unfortunately, we lose Rave Racers, which is a game that I always wanted to play, and just always wanted to have an opportunity to get to know as well as all the other games in the series, but it's just like not a thing in arcades, at least in the US, so never got that chance.
Yeah, me either, to be honest. Never had the chance to play it, unfortunately.
Seemed really interesting, although I've also read some people say it's nothing special, so take that as you will. But also means we can't put in Ridge Racer 2, which is really almost exactly the same as Ridge Racer 1 from what I can understand, and also the Ridge Racer 5 arcade battle. So we had to skip out a couple there, but we still have 13 games to talk about. And the way we decided to approach this was we gave each game a ranking of points from 1 to 13, 13 being the most points we could award to a game, and 1 being the least. And we awarded our points based on how we felt, and then we tallied those up. So this ranking is a combination, you could say, of our feelings, which were very, very aligned with each other. We voted the same way on almost every single game except for one. But we won't tell you what that is until we get into it. It's actually an interesting one, too, that we kind of diverged on.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll start with as it works out, because there are 2 ties on this list because of the way things shook out. We'll start out with number 11s, which is Ridge Racer 6 and Ridge Racer DS. Now, which of these do you hate more? I guess is a better way to figure out which to talk about first.
Well, I'll go with Ridge Racer DS here.
Okay.
And I'll kind of briefly sum it up just to get it started. But
no, we'll start with one of them. We'll start with DS, and then we'll do 6. I think that's a good way to approach it. So. Yeah,
I would say so. But Ridge Racer. So is it DS we're talking about now, or 6?
DS.
DS, we'll go with DS, right. I consider this one of the most unplayable Ridge Racers in the entire list, which is why I gave it such a harsh score. I really do feel as if it had no redeeming features at all, even on the DS.
It was impressive in as much as it was a port of Ridge Racer 64 on a handheld system, which was like back in the day. We didn't really the PSP and the Nintendo DS were the first times that we had 3D quality games in the palms of our hands, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, this is a port of one of my least favorite Ridge Racer games on the platform that didn't have anything really but a D-pad unless you tried to use one of those terrible touch controls.
Yeah, and that must have seemed like a cool idea on paper, and I'm imagining it looked great on websites too, like touchscreen steering wheels, my. And then actually playing it was awful. And the thing is, like, I would love to just say that's the hardware's fault, but Codemasters managed to put a pretty competent grid port on the DS. So
true.
That doesn't wash for me. And even Codemasters made a DS-specific racing series in Touch and Race, or Create and Race, sorry. That even had track creation tools and everything, so I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, you can't blame the hardware for this one, Namco.
No, I think that's totally true. I mean, yeah, I had those Toka Race Driver games, and they were fine. And also, we have to remember that the first 2 Ridge Racers, like 3 Ridge Racers, I guess you would say, on the PlayStation, didn't benefit from DualShock support.
Precisely.
So so they only had D-pads to go on, and those games were, I mean, well, they weren't great, some of them, but still, like they were more playable than this mess. And I mean, I don't know. I think I'm a little more forgiving for it because, like, the way I look at it is just like it was an impressive feat at the time. Yes, it's a game I don't want to go back and play. I mean, I didn't have a DS until a couple of years after a system launched. And the fact that I didn't include this as one of my first DS games shows you how, the issues that I had with it.
The Ridge Racer minigame and Go Vacation's better than this.
Yeah, I guess, that's a spin-off we could put on the list if we really wanted to.
Oh, yeah, good point. But, I find it interesting that, just a neat wee segue here, I guess, that you've not put this as your lowest rating, to be honest.
Yeah, well, okay, so one of the things that we're going to do with every entry is that I thought would be fun is if we just mention the brief memory that we have of each of these games before we move on. And for DS, what I will say is that I remember going over a friend's house who had a Nintendo DS, and he had this game, because this was like one of 2 launch titles for the system or something like that. I mean, I think it had more, but like this is one of the primary ones aside from Super Mario 64. Yeah. And I remember he didn't want to play it at all. So I asked him, like, if I could. And I did this a couple times with a couple friends who had DSs. I would, like, go over to their houses and use their systems just to play this game. And yeah, the experience never lasted more than, like, 5 minutes because it's not a very good game. But that's my memory of Ridge Racer DS.
Mine is actually pretty similar in the sense that when I got my DS, I picked up Ridge Racer and Sega's The Rub Rabbits, or would have been Project Touch, I believe, which was a fantastic game that I would love to discuss, but not today. And Ridge Racer DS just got ignored, which was a shame because portable Ridge Racer seemed great at the time, and with the DS having similar capabilities, you could say, to the Nintendo 64, maybe slightly PlayStation 1, I was hoping that we could get an experience that was at least playable, but I still don't know what went wrong to this day. It just feels very sluggish. It doesn't really feel like Ridge Racer, and even compared to the early Ridge Racer titles, the drifting just felt unmanageable.
Yeah, this is one of 2 games on the list I have very, very limited experience with, so I don't remember exactly why controls were terrible, but I fully believe...
You knew they were.
yeah, I fully believe that they were... When we talk about Ridge Racer 64 in a couple of entries, I will explain in detail why they didn't work so well for that game, in my opinion. But yeah, so that's really Ridge Racer DS. We'll move on then to Ridge Racer 6, which is actually the game that I put as my least favorite in the franchise. And because I said it was my worst, I guess I'll lead off with my thoughts that this game was tasked with reinventing the series and balked in every conceivable sense of the word. It is a total unrepentant failure. It is indicative of everything I would hate about Ridge Racer games after this point. The nitrous system is a shoddy attempt at trying to inject some sort of, I don't mean to sound like a douchebag here, but I'm going to, some sort of like mainstream appeal, like to, you know, an otherwise standard arcade racer. They completely drain the handling of any and all of its personality. These games do not take skill to play in the same way the earlier ones did. They just don't. The steering is just you're like, people say Ridge Racer on rails. That wasn't true as much for a couple games in the series, but with 6, it definitely is the case. And granted, the handheld versions that came out before this were definitely guilty of the same thing, but I think they were better games overall. I think the issue with Ridge Racer 6 too is that, like, it just, like, everything about it's just so bland. Like, the track design, the music, the career mode, I think actually is, like, maybe this game's worst failing, because it's literally just it's a collection of essentially like standalone events. They never really materialize into anything. They just throw like 100 of them at you at one time, and it's just like, go nuts. And there are no secrets. It's not withholding anything. There's like everything about this game you can figure out from within the first 2 minutes of playing it. I don't know. Sorry. This one's a sore subject for me.
No, I find it interesting because, I mean, clearly with your rankings then, because this was the point of failure that would ultimately doom Ridge Racer, you would still rather give Ridge Racer DS more props, which is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with any of the points you've made there. Ridge Racer 6 is not only the most bland of the Ridge Racers, but also the most, how would I describe this? Like, there's nothing about the game that you could recommend to someone who might want to play it, because you've got that weird on-rails handling that you brought up, in the sense that the car seems to move on an axis. It's just so uninspired. There's nothing about that Ridge Racer style that's there outside of a half-decent soundtrack, and I mean, you're right, this is the point you could probably go, this is where it all went wrong, much in the same way people would refer to, like, maybe Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast is where Sonic started to go a bit iffy, but, like, Ridge Racer didn't even have the chance to completely fall apart after 6, because it seemed like it was so bland and boring that it really did speed up the process of Ridge Racer becoming irrelevant.
Yeah, there's just nothing about this game that I would ever want to go back and experience. I mean, 7 did... You can figure out, obviously, 7's higher on the list than 6 is at this point. Yeah. And 7 was the better... If you're going to try and take 6 and improve it enough to, like, be a serviceable game, that was 7. You know, and 7 added so much that we'll talk about later. But, like, 6 is on its own... It's just not... It's a very bare-bones experience, which I know Ridge Racer, especially a lot of the early games, were very bare-bones experiences, but... This one is just so lacking that one thing that would draw you back in. I mean, like, yeah, this is a series that had story modes and, like, dedicated modes where you could create your own teams and great handling models and great physics and great graphics and great car design and great track design, and all of that is missing from this game.
You touched on one thing there that I would like to bring up and say that it does actually look a bit like an up-resed PSP game. Like, the graphics were just so, like, just terrible, really. Like, you would think that looking at it that it was an up-resed PSP game and it wasn't on a home console, because it just looks so flat and lifeless.
Yeah, I mean, the graphics are fine. Like, in the sense of you could get away with a lot, like, as a launch title for a new system. I mean, you always can. But on the 360, when your competition is PGR3 at launch, because we forgot to mention this was a launch title. Yeah, PGR3 is to this day one of my favorite racing games of all time, and it was a launch title. And it just, like, it set the bar visually, just kind of environmentally. Like, I don't know, just the feeling you got when you're you know, racing in the cockpit view in that game was just so immersive, and I just never got that at all from Ridge Racer 6. So
it couldn't be two more different titles, to be honest. Like, you've got Ridge Racer 6, which feels uninspired and uninteresting, and then PGR 3 kind of living up to that hype.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's just move on. We'll list our memories first, and then we'll move on. So, Ridge Racer 6 for me. I remember I owned this game, and then I think I sold it very quickly or something. It was one of the first games I got for the 360, and I think I got rid of it. And then a couple of years later, I was like, I want to give it a second chance. So I had a friend who lived across the street, and he had a copy of it. And I was like, can I just borrow this? And he was like, we'll pay you to take it. And then that's how I ended up with Ridge Racer 6 again for free. I actually kind of made money off of it in a way, because I was able to sell it and then get it back again. So it's not too bad.
I need to say, I'm quite impressed that you lived on a street where it was like the biggest conglomerate of Ridge Racer fans ever compiled in one street, by the sounds of it.
Oh, they were.
So that they even had the 6 and all the bad games.
Yeah, no, they called it. They were like, we hate this game because it's like Hot Wheels cars. That was the exact quote, which is understandable. I mean, it's a bad game regardless of whether or not you're a Ridge Racer fan. But I was like, okay, their pain is my gain in this situation. So.
My memory isn't very exciting. I just remember playing it for the first time at a family member's house and just thinking, this isn't my Ridge Racer. # not my Ridge Racer.
Wah, So now we move on to number 10, which is Ridge Racer 64. So now we can actually, discuss the meat of why the basis for Ridge Racer DS wasn't so great. So yeah, this game just has a really interesting history because it wasn't developed by Namco. I think it's the only game on this list, yeah, technically, as I look at the list, that was not developed by Namco. It was developed by Nintendo Software Technology, I think, which made 1080, I think it was 1080 Avalanche on the GameCube. That's the only NST title that sticks out to me. I mean, I'm sure they made other things, but that I know that I've played because Nintendo didn't really brand a lot of the games that they made, but when NST did it, it was like one of the first logos you'd see when the game started up, so you kind of knew. And yeah, just from the moment you start playing it, it's like, this is weird. This is not Ridge Racer. This is very clearly Ridge Racer through the lens of a different team, a different company that doesn't really understand Ridge Racer. I mean, just to give a basic background, it's like you have a bunch of different random cars from the franchise as well as a couple new ones, which is it was kind of cool because it was like, oh, you could drive the car, the FA Racing from the first game, or you could drive the Assoluto Passante from R4, and it was like, oh, it's almost like a best of, like a Ridge Racer Legends.
Yeah,
and then they had
collection.
Yeah, a whole car collection, and then they had this. They almost did the same thing with the tracks as well. You could drive the first game's tracks, Revolution, and then they had a couple new ones that they made. It was Renegade and something else that the game was so hard that I never actually got to the downtown tracks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was like a weird collection, but I think where it just all falls apart was just the gameplay. It was a very difficult game to play, especially because the N64's control stick was not up to the task.
Yeah, it kind of handles as if aliens came down to Earth and asked you to explain Ridge Racer, and then they took your kind of feedback and then tried to make Ridge Racer. That's the way it felt.
The music's weird. There are a couple remixes of old songs. There are mostly new tracks. I think there's one song in this game called Maximum Overdrive or something like that. Something Overdrive. I love that song, but every other song in this game is kind of weird. And yeah, I just remember struggling with the controls as a kid, and just playing this game endlessly to try and convince myself I loved it as much as other Ridge Racer games. But I mean, in terms of like graphics, and I think it was like it wasn't 60 frames per second, but it was a very fast, very smooth game, so that was cool. Yeah. But I felt like I couldn't keep up with it. I felt like the action on track was too fast for me to handle, and the controls weren't adequate enough for me to get through everything. And also some of the cars are pretty fugly looking, to be honest. So
nice.
Yeah, they're pretty gross. Yeah, so memory I have of it, I distinctly recall accidentally deleting my game save. And that was upsetting because that was a hard game. And then to try and recover from that was something I don't think I could ever do. Because as I said, there's two different... So there was like the Revolution and then the standard tracks, and then there were the expert offshoots of that, and then they came up with their own like Renegade track, and then like this downtown one. I never ever got to the downtown one because it only happens like later in the career mode, and I deleted my game save a first time. So like there's like half of this game I've never experienced, sadly.
You're going to have to get another Nintendo 64 then and beat it. That's the challenge.
I mean, fortunately, we have more modern methods of me playing Ridge Racer 64. If I really want to...
What could you mean?
Well, the same modern methods I used to play Beetle Adventure Racing and have a great time a couple weeks ago. But I'm not going to do that for Ridge Racer 64 because I don't like that game.
Fair. My experience with this game is pretty limited, to be honest. I played a kind of show floor demo of it once in my local mall. That's what I remember most, because once again it was a Ridge Racer game, so I was pretty excited, and then I was let down, which is quite a recurring theme with this series. But yeah, that's Ridge Racer, isn't it? So
yeah, I should say this game was a massive deal when it was announced, at least to me, because like it was a Ridge Racer game on the N64. Like, this was the PlayStation's biggest racing franchise up until Gran Turismo showed up. And it was on the N64. That was a huge deal, but if only we knew then, before it came out, what we know now. So,
yep.
That is Ridge Racer 64. Number 9, Ridge Racer Vita. I actually give this game a little bit more credit than other people do, but I still scored it lower than you, Brendan.
Yeah, which is pretty interesting, because I think we've talked about before, kind of off the podcast, how much I just didn't like this game and felt it was a bit of a waste of space, but somehow I've gave it a higher score than you. It's pretty funny, actually.
So I can put up with a lot of things. Like, I can put up with this game only having like 5 cars when it came out and like 3 tracks. And I can even kind of put up with it not having like any sort of a, career mode in any sense, or any sort of a single player experience. In retrospect, that may have just been launch goggles of the Vita, and that may have just been, I don't know, I was really desperate for a new Ridge Racer, man. I mean, at this point, this is 2011, and the franchise is definitely on its last legs, and we all know it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had a decent time with this game, and yeah, I can't really put my finger on why. I mean, a lot of people are like complaining about the free-to-play model, but the thing that often gets forgotten about is the fact that this game was such a massive failure before it ever showed up that Namco heavily discounted the price of the base game and gave you all of the DLC for free. At least all the DLC except for like 2 tracks for free, like right out of the gate. So that definitely helped things, but yeah, I don't know. I think I definitely could have warranted scoring this game lower, but that said, I think it was more playable than any of the other games on this list, and I tend to value the technical achievement of it, so the fact that we were getting something kind of on the level of Ridge Racer 7, albeit running at 30 frames per second, which I know is sacrilege to some. Yeah, you probably have an issue with that. I'm okay with that. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was impressive on the hardware at the time, but yeah, this isn't one that I would really go back and play either.
It's pretty much a glorified tech demo as far as I'm concerned. If Ridge Racer 6 was the beginning of the downfall, Ridge Racer Vita was putting the final shovel of dirt over its Ridge Racer's corpse, because that series was in no place to try that kind of model in the first place.
Yep.
So it attracted all this unnecessary negative attention that had everyone pretty much shitting on the franchise, even people that didn't really care about it. We know the way the internet works. People grasp onto things even if they don't understand it. And that was the case with this game. I felt like it was just so tone deaf to try and implement this DLC model. And yeah, admittedly, if you played the game a few years down the line, like myself, you got a decent amount of content, but at the end of the day, it just seemed as if Namco didn't really have a clue what they were aiming for with it, and it plays well enough. Like you said, graphically it's pretty nice compared to like the home console versions.
Sure.
And yeah, I don't know, I just feel as if this was a bit of a horrible misstep, and it just felt like too much of a cash grab in a series that is plagued with so many ports or slight changes rebranded as new games.
Yeah, because this game got absolutely torn apart in the media for its pricing model, and I don't disagree with it. There were a couple bright spots for me. I love the direction they took with the car design in this game, and like I think one of the reasons I love Ridge Racer, and definitely as we get closer to the top of this list, I'll be talking about this a lot more, but there's this kind of mythology to the series, this like history, this kind of awareness of context, this world building that Namco always did. So the fact that the Assoluto Promessa was in the game, which was a car that was in Ridge Racer 4, and the new one clearly was inspired by the design of the first one, and the fact that they brought back the Fatalita, and there were a couple cars in this game I can't exactly remember, but they had liveries and new designs that evoke the earlier versions of those cars in the franchise. That's how you win me over. I kind of noted these like callbacks. Also, they sold a lot of previous soundtracks, a lot of old songs you could get on the PlayStation Network. A lot of them were free, and that was cool. So I like being able to drive around to like remixes of Disco Ball and my favorite songs from Ridge Racer 4 and so on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot to like as Ridge Racer fans in here, but I think that the 44 Metacritic speaks for itself in terms of how it's received on launch. That is a pretty poor rating. And everyone just basically says the same thing. They don't know where the price for this game came from with what it launched with. And it's a shame because, like you said, it's actually one of the games with the most fan service, you could argue. There's quite a lot of nice content in here, and the soundtracks especially was a nice addition, but unfortunately it didn't hit the ground running, and there's so many stories where that's kind of ruined a game, and I think that was the case here. By the time they did add decent content, people had already moved on, and there's nothing even to move on to on the Vita. I think people just moved on from the Vita full stop.
Yeah, and as we talk about memories of it, there's something that we definitely can't miss, which is something I completely forgot about, but now that I remember, it totally justifies my rather high ranking of this game. The Daytona USA crossover, which was the most ridiculous thing that I think has ever happened in arcade racing history. Yeah, so when that was announced, I lost my shit. I played it, and I remember just like learning all the words to the song and just like fucking singing it along with my man Takenobu Mitsuyoshi. So basically, if you don't know, the guy who did the Daytona USA song, who does all the Daytona USA songs with that iconic voice, he did a version of the Ridge Racer. It is the Ridge Racer song, like the song called Ridge Racer from the first game, with vocals that he made that are just talking about, oh, it's Ridge Racer. It's so good. Oh my god, I want to listen to it. We're definitely gonna put it in this show. It's gonna pop up at some point. Definitely.
Yeah. That was really cool, to be honest. One of the kind of shining lights of the game, and one of the reasons that I put my score kind of relatively high, because it was cool seeing that Sega.
It was so cool,
Racer
man.
Namco crossover. I was there for that, definitely.
They put the car in the game. They put the Hornet from Daytona USA, and it is exactly the Model 2 Hornet. Like, it's this blocky ass car from 1993 driving alongside, like, you know, all these really pretty car models on the Vita, and it's absolutely hilarious. And there's like nitrous too, and I think the nitrous actually like comes out the side of the car or something like that because it has side exhaust. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. That's a fan service that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that sums up exactly what we're saying here. It wasn't that Ridge Racer Vita was lazy, not at all. It was just a bit misguided. I don't doubt for a second there was good intentions here, but it just didn't come off the way I think the developers would have wanted it to.
Yeah, the bean counters had a little bit too much to say with regard to this one, I think. So that's Vita, and now we'll move on to number 8. Oh, did you have anything to say about Ridge Racer Vita? Do you have a memory?
So I actually got my first Vita only about 3 years ago. I imported a white and green model, which looks incredible.
Oh, that's pretty, yeah.
So nice. And the first game I downloaded from the PlayStation Store was Ridge Racers, and that's how I basically spent my Christmas Day.
Oh,
so
okay.
A good memory in that sense, I would say. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, you still had like the, I got this new console, you know, it feels so, it's so nice, you know. You had the benefit of those launch goggles going for you.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing more frustrating than playing a Vita because you just look at it and think, you had so much goddamn potential.
Yeah.
How the hell did this not work out? And sometimes I still look at it covered in dust like,
yeah,
how the hell did this thing not succeed?
I love it, man. It's one of my favorite hardware ever, definitely.
It's just so nice. It feels perfect to use, and
it got a Wipeout game that I love and you hate, but
that's for another pod, I think.
It is. Yeah, so we'll move on. We'll move right along now. Number 8. This one's interesting because remember I said at the top of the show that there was one that we seemed to heavily disagree on. It was the original Ridge Racer, which I gave 7 points and you gave 3. So Brendan, explain yourself.
Okay, put the pitchforks down. My score for this is in relation to what I score another game later on in the list, Ridge Racer Revolution, because I feel like Ridge Racer is obviously one of the most iconic entries in the franchise, for sure. But in terms of wanting to go back to it now, I would always choose Revolution over that, and that's kind of the standpoint I had, was I felt as if that game iterated on everything so perfectly that as much as I appreciate what Ridge Racer did for the series, I just don't feel like it holds up as well. I mean, I love the game to bits. The soundtrack's phenomenal. Who doesn't love Rotterdam Nation? Well,
me.
Oh god. Wow. That's the worst thing you've said so far.
Oh no.
Come on, everybody loves a bit of gabber, poorly made gabber from Japan, surely.
I can't. That's the one thing. I love the stupidest music, but I cannot do sped up robot. I can't do that. Now you've lost me.
PSP remixes are even worse in that sense as well.
Oh god. No. That's where I draw the line, man.
But yeah, in terms of the original game, giving it such a low score, I just feel like it was great at the time, but I feel like the other entries on PS1 really do eclipse it, and I don't see why anyone would willingly choose to go back to it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, which is why I also scored Revolution higher on this list, but yeah, I don't know. I do kind of give a lot of weight to what, significance, where significance fits in, and this was the first game in the franchise. Now, I do have a lot of issues with it, namely the handling model is garbage, and it's kind of based on that flaw that I have with the game, that I honestly, I don't understand how in the world the PlayStation launched with all of the steam that it had in the very beginning, because yes, Ridge Racer is very pretty, by 1995 standards, and yes, you got an arcade game, an almost arcade perfect port of it onto the first really console capable of 3D graphics, at least once it didn't look crappy like the Saturn. But within 30 seconds of anyone playing this game, I don't know how they didn't feel extreme dread, because the handling is awful. It's really bad. I think we talked about this in one of our first shows. I think we talked about why Sega Rally's handling was so great, and I think the example I gave of the complete opposite of that is the first Ridge Racer, in that whereas in Sega Rally you can really kind of feel a rhythm, and there's a weight transfer and everything. In Ridge Racer, you either tap on the brakes like you do, in Ridge Racer, the way you get into a drift is you tap on the brakes and you turn, and then the tail kicks out, or you lift, with faster cars, you can just lift your thumb off the throttle.
Yeah. And
that's all it takes to brake sideways. And when you do that in this game, what basically happens is your car just I don't know, it just decides the front end's just going to go where the hell it wants to go. It really doesn't pay attention to you. And it just kind of lazily slides back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you try to get it pointed in the right direction, but there's almost a timer for how long the car will stay in that gripless state, where it's just kind of wavering. And you don't know when it will break out of it, and when it does break out of it, you might be pointing at a wall or you might be pointing at the road. There's really no way of telling. So this was another game that I could not finish, in as much as I was never able to get all the cars in the game, or I was never able to get the devil, or not the devil, but the angel, because it was too hard. And the AI is, there is no AI. As a matter of fact, there is no AI in this game. They just, and there wouldn't be for a couple of entries, obviously. No. But yeah, just not good memories going back. But at the same time, this was the game that started me off, with the series, and for that I have to give it some props.
No, and understand that, definitely. I think the funny thing is, if you played that first game, I don't think you would know the series just about drifting until you see the very first Attract demo. Because when I was playing the game initially, I was kind of driving in a normal manner, not trying to drift too much. And then the Attract demo kicks in and everyone's fucking drifting at 90-degree angles through every corner, and you're just oh, so that's what I'm supposed to be doing? There's no way that I'm going to be capable of doing that. Yeah,
I'm not sure that I was totally aware of how to properly play any Ridge Racer, now that you mention it, until I got to 4. Because, I was a kid, and there's no way I would have known, but yeah, that track demo, I'm thinking of the song in that demo, and it's a really good song.
Yeah.
I actually, that's a song I like, and I really like the replay song, which I think, if I remember correctly, is just a bunch of errant noises, just sirens blaring.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs on the soundtrack that just kind of, they had a normal beat in it, and they're that sounds a bit too generic, just throw some fucking sound effects in there and we'll get there eventually. And then they were we need to make a song that Adam will hate so much that it annoys him every time he hears it, and that's how we get Rotterdam Nation as well.
Yep, exactly. That's it.
But yeah, I understand the significance argument, I really do. But I would argue that the other PS1 entries had more significance in terms of making the franchise worthwhile, because I think the thing that's a bit shocking so far is, and maybe it's just us being cynics, but so far we've talked about why we hate most of the games so far in the bottom tier of the list, instead of maybe what made them good, with the exception of Vita, ironically, which is one of the worst held games.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really as simple as just like, this was one of the first games I ever played, and like, there is a distinctly different style to a Ridge Racer game, to a Namco produced arcade game, than to Daytona USA or Sega Rally, which is like what, you know, the other games I was playing when I was a really little kid, and like, there was just, you know, Ridge Racer has this different feel. It's the track design. That's something I also have to give credit to for this first game, because Seaside Route 765 is really, you know, there's a reason why they keep bringing it back, and why they kept bringing it back in like every game that they could. It's a perfect track, you know. It's one of those legendary tracks. It's obviously, you know, it's a short lap, but
yeah,
it offers a lot in that space, and all the corners are so memorable, and you know exactly, I mean, years and years of this, decades of playing these games, you know, I know what to do at every single corner. That's not to say I can necessarily achieve that goal, because as I said, the handling is terrible. But yeah. However, you know what? I will give them a lot of shade for the expert track in this game is terrible, because it's just like, they use this conceit of, oh, you're driving through a construction site, to like give you absolutely zero room, and like the walls are super high and they close in really, really deep. I mean, I remember the point where you go from the base track to the construction, the extra portion of it, and you can see the moment where the track gets like 40% smaller, and it's like,
damn. Oh, they don't try and hide it.
Yeah, they don't hide it. And it's also unfair, because it's like, that's how you get around rendering like any graphics at all. It's like, oh, we made the walls like 10 feet high, so you can't see over them. So it just felt like you were being cheated, honestly.
Oh yeah, definitely. The thing is though, like, as a kind of a child playing this, there was always something exciting about games having hidden secrets, I felt. So when you could see that there was another track built into the main track, I don't know, as a child playing it, full of wonder, like, it was really cool to see that kind of the track could be extended further, even if it was pretty garbage.
Oh, dude, I used to like draw tracks when I was a kid, and I used to like come up with like fake video games. And I used to draw like, oh, there was this one road in the Ridge Racer track that you couldn't access. Like, what would the track look like if
yes,
I could do that? I used to do that all the time, and it was so cool. And yeah, the idea that like there was one track but different paths that branch off of it, it was that kind of world building that I really liked about the game. So, yeah, dude, we really need to pick up this conversation. We might have to break this into 2 parts, depending on how it goes. I think that might be what we do. Yeah, so memories of Ridge Racer. This entire thing has been just memories. I will say the first time that I discovered that you could turn around, hit the wall at a certain speed, go through and play the track in reverse or mirrored, that was pretty phenomenal. That was mind-blowing.
Yeah, that was such a cool moment to find. And funnily enough, my memory's very to that, in the sense that when you versed the Angel car for the first time, for some reason it totally blew my mind as a kid playing that you started on the beach rather than...
Oh yeah, it's so weird.
Because it was like, holy shit, what's going on? It was like, for some reason, it was like such a cool moment, and it really isn't that big a deal, but like we just talked about with me creating tracks and the world building, it was just one of those things like, oh my god, it's nighttime and we're starting in a different part of the track.
Dude, the nighttime was so fucking unfair in that game. But
yeah.
Anyway. All right, so next on our list, number 7 is Ridge Racer 3D, and I really can't talk a lot about this one because As I said, there were 2 games on this list I didn't own. I was able to play some Ridge Racer DS, and I know what that game's like because it's a lot like 64. I have like zero concept of 3D, man. So take it away.
So one of the reasons I hate Ridge Racer DS so much is because Ridge Racer 3D pretty much makes it irrelevant. This is a Nintendo port of the exact same gameplay you find in 6 and 7, and whether that's a positive or negative is obviously for you to decide. But it was a perfectly playable, portable Ridge Racer on a Nintendo console that had a decent soundtrack, and it ran pretty much perfectly, and the 3D effects were actually really nice. You even had an in-cockpit view as well, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like overall, we're willing to kind of look the other way when our favorite games, or maybe not so favorite games, maybe games that we play but aren't in love with, get put into handhelds, because it's like, oh, well, this experience maybe didn't necessitate me sitting in front of my TV, but, if I can do it when I'm on the plane or something like that, Stockholm Syndrome and all that, when you're on a trip, you don't really have much to do, so at least I can play, an average Ridge Racer game.
And that exactly sums it up. It's an average Ridge Racer game right in the middle of the road of everything. I think that's why it's kind of in this ranking, because it really is pretty much the most, not even bare bones, that's doing it a disservice. It does have a lot of content, but you're getting no surprises whatsoever from it.
Yeah, I think something that bothered me was I really didn't like the car on the cover, and like some of the stylistic changes they made with the game, because I have watched some of it on YouTube, and some of the tracks, it was another situation where like I wouldn't be surprised to find out that like Namco developed this, right? But I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if someone else did, because maybe just being on a Nintendo system, it just doesn't look like a Ridge Racer game to me. The one car that's on the cover, I don't even know what it's called, but it looks like, look, that actually does look like a Hot Wheels car. Like,
yeah, it's
weird muscle car.
Guy would imagine very muscle car would look like. That's the kind of weird vibe I get from it. It's not the best car for the cover, and in general, it's just a standard Ridge Racer game. There really is nothing really that special about it. Modern Ridge Racer game, I should say. But yeah, it's something I would rather play over DS for obvious reasons. And if you're looking for kind of bang for your buck, then it beats out the Vita version too.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing, is that with the Vita version, they obviously adopted that terrible pricing model, and then with Ridge Racer 3D, they just came out with the normal game, and would you believe that the scores were normal? Like,
yeah, exactly. And every review pretty much says this is a racing game.
Oh god.
You drift, you use nitrous, and you try to win the race. 6 out of 10.
But Brendan, it wouldn't be a modern review of a Ridge Racer game if you didn't spend the first 3 paragraphs making jokes related to Kaz Hirai.
Oh god, yeah, definitely. Or complaining about the lack of damage modelling. The amount of reviews that bring that type of thing up is infuriating, to say the least. But I say that as a Sega Rally Revo apologist, and having to read that over and over again as well. I've already a bit of a knack for hating when reviewers bring up, oh, there's no damage modelling in this game.
It was such an antiquated thing,
Yeah.
Because Gran Turismo didn't have damage modeling a lot. It bothered a lot of people for years and years and years, but yeah, the first 3 games were like the best-selling games on their respective consoles, so guess what? I don't think anyone gave a shit.
Exactly. I think it was just this time period when the 3DS came out, from when the PS3 and that came out as well. For some reason, every game journalist in the world decided that every racing game should have damage modelling. I'm not sure where they came to this conclusion, but yeah.
San Francisco Rush had it.
Oh. Yeah, that's it. That's the standard. But honestly, like any car game released within that window, for some reason, not having damage modelling was a negative, and believe us, we had a whole Ridge Racer spin-off dedicated to damage modelling, and it's fucking awful. So.
Yeah, look what that got you, folks.
Every game should be Burnout, basically.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, hey, I love Burnout, but
Yeah,
every game should not be Burnout. So
definitely not.
yeah, so I have no memories of Ridge Racer 3D because I didn't play it. So I think the only memory I guess you could say I have is when I was looking through all the DLC tracks for Vita, and they ported, I think, a couple 3D ones to the Vita, and I chose not to buy them because I didn't play the game, so I had no touch point for like, oh, I want to go revisit that track. So yeah.
My memory would be that in one of the local malls, Nintendo was doing like a 3DS roadshow prior to release, and they had loads of games set up like Resident Evil and Mario and Ridge Racer, which is the game I went straight to. I was the only person playing it. And I was so impressed with seeing a competent Ridge Racer running on the handheld that I decided I would buy it, because it was just good to see a Nintendo console that wasn't powered by a toaster. I mean, it still wasn't great, but it was so Nintendo portable, I should say. So yeah, I just, the way it ran, I was impressed with the glassesless 3D at the time that I would go on to never use again. And yeah, just that's a good memory for me in some senses, because it was good seeing a decent portable Ridge Racer running on something that wasn't a Sony handheld.
Yeah, allow me to be pandering for a second and say just, damn, I love you British people because you give Nintendo so much crap, and it's so great to hear. Systems powered by toasters, like, yes, absolutely. This is what I've been saying all along. No one agrees with me at my job or at school or anywhere.
I mean, you know, Reggie Fils-Aimé up. If the game's not fun, why bother? He says as he plugs his hamster into the Wii U so that it runs games.
Did you hear what he said this week? He was like, yeah, you people are stupid because the whole reason we came out with the NES Classic and the SNES Classic was because we had no system for a year. And you all bought it. So we're not doing that again.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, like, he was, the way he worded the whole question around the Nintendo 64 Classic too, if they're making it, I don't know about it.
Yeah,
well,
that's great.
That'd be interesting.
No, I'm kidding. Nintendo, you're great. I'm going to give you all my money when Super Smash Bros. Ultimate comes out.
Yeah,
so.
They've really, you can say all you want, Nintendo, but when push comes to shove, when they actually decide to try, we always fall for it.
When push comes to shove, I don't think I'm playing any other game for the remainder of my life except for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Everyone I know is going to have it. It's going to be online. It's going to be great.
Can't wait for the Hornet to be added to DLC.
Oh, absolutely. Fighters Megamix. Yeah. All right. This is a point of the list now where we go from games I don't really like so much to games that I actually do respect and have a lot of good memories of.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so next on our list, number 6 is Ridge Racer 7. Yeah, I was so surprised that this game wasn't bad. Like, and that's such an average sounding, such a ho-hum, like, not convincing thing to say about a game you like. But no, I couldn't believe that they were able to take the bones of Ridge Racer 6, give it a lot more content, which that game sorely needed, come up with a really solid customization angle that I never expected from the franchise. Between all of that, they added a bunch of tracks where I actually thought the track design was pretty interesting. The tracks in the jungle, like the Lost Ruins, and that was all new for this game, and I thought that was pretty cool. There was some fan service, I think, in there, as far as they brought 765 back, which 6 didn't have that track, I don't think. I think they just brought back for 7. Yeah, it's like one of the last tracks. 7. Yeah, it's like one of the last tracks you get in the game. And I have a very, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but I have a slightly emotional thing to say about that track that will pertain to my memory when we finish this discussion. But yeah, I was just like, I was surprised, like, this is the game Ridge Racer 6 could have been. And yeah, I mean, I know I complain about the handling, and the handling in this game is functionally the same as 6, but I think it was just wrapped in just a more just interesting experience, a deeper experience overall. Like I said, the career mode and the track design, and that allowed me to kind of put up with some of the things I didn't like so much about the engine. And yeah, I mean, I was just shocked it was as good as it was.
I would define it as a sexy experience.
Yeah.
The menus as well, just like that dynamic music that changes from menu to menu.
Absolutely.
Oh my god, yes. I love that shit. And even like the career mode at it, still just do this race, but they have that nice kind of world map look and the news ticker at the bottom that starts to hint towards the post game contents. I mean, come on, that's what we're after. And
I love the news
Ridge
sticker.
Racer 7 gets it. Yes, exactly. So it's one of those things not many people would notice, but I knew for a fact that you would have picked up on it as well.
To be honest, I can't even remember what about the news sticker I love, but I remember reading something that made me go like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I don't even know. But yeah, there were like some like tidbits in there, right? That just like, oh, they mentioned a guy's name from like a team from Ridge Racer 4, I think, at one point. Yeah. That was cool.
It would refer to potential like car manufacturers that get dropped from like Type 4 and stuff that might be making a comeback, and referring to the fact like the old Angelus driver is frustrated at the new Angelus driver and stuff like that. Oh, that's great. Like,
is that like fantastic. A Stig reference in like 2006? No, it had to be too early. It was before they stacked the Stig.
They called it though. They've seen it in the future clearly.
Yeah.
You've got a great car roster with fully upgradable cars, which was another really good feature. Yep. The online, like, there was something that really simple I loved about the lobby system where it would auto-translate preset messages between players. So, like, if you're racing, like, a Japanese guy, like, you could actually get a conversation going with the preset messages. It was just a very nice experience all round. I think Ridge Racer 7, like you said, it's what 6 could have been, but 7 had so much more care put into it that the gameplay doesn't stick out as a bit outdated so much.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if, like, you know, we know there was a year between the 360 and the PS3, and I'm wondering if Namco basically approached these launches like, we're definitely going to have a launch game for the PlayStation console, and then, I don't know, halfway through development, somebody said, hey, you know that Ridge Racer 7 demo you're working on? We can make a lot of money if we put that on the Xbox 360, so they did.
I would be surprised if that was the case. Because
that's how 6 feels in comparison to 7. 7 feels like a fully fleshed out game, and it feels like the biggest Ridge Racer, which, like, look, it's the biggest. That's not the same as being the best, but an achievement of being the biggest is, like we were saying, you know, it's fan service to people like us who've been following the series for a while.
Yeah, because the amount of small touches in the game are incredible. Like, when you verse the Devil drive, what is the Devil car's like actual manufacturer name? I always forget.
I think it's the Revelta.
Yeah.
Soldat, right?
Oh, is it Soldat?
Well, in Ridge Racer 5, according to my Prima official strategy guide, RIP Prima, that they put out for Ridge Racer 5, I think it was a Soldat Crenali or something like that. I want to say, yeah. Yeah,
so like that car that when you race that in the post game, like, it's ridiculously fast, possibly so to catch in most of the cars, unless you had one of the special vehicles you could unlock, and like, it purposely always stops right before the finish line, just waiting for you, taunting you at the end of the last lap, and just I love that kind of stuff because it made it feel like a real world. That this guy's just a cocky shit basically, and I love that so much. There's so much to the game that have that. Like, there's also a rocket car that when it's not using nitrous, it goes like 15 miles per hour. But when it's using nitrous, it's going ridiculously fast.
Yes, absolutely. And I will clear up the Soldat Revelta confusion. My confusion was warranted because this right here is why I fucking love Ridge Racer. Because I'm on the Ridge Racer wiki and it says, the original Crenali appears as a secret RT-13 racing car in, I guess in the first Ridge Racer, and then ... Yeah. In Ridge Racer 5, the 13th racing car was revealed to be made by Revelta. In Ridge Racer PSP, the Crenali features an all-new design following the sale of Revelta to Soldat. So they came up with the narrative that Soldat bought Revelta and destroyed the brand. I love shit like that. It's so great. It's why I love when they actually try with Ridge Racer, when they put care into these things. I love stupid little backstory things like that. I mean,
it just so cool. It just makes me think like how cool an R racing sequel could have been as well if they started to incorporate this type of thing. And oh man, I'm with you on this. I just love all this backstory lore, and the news ticker basically encapsulated that in like sentences that were so like succinct and worded in a way that would catch guys' hours' attention. And yeah, Ridge Racer 7 just has so many cool features.
It's so hard to explain, but yes. I mean, if you're looking at it from the outside, it is window dressing. But for some reason, it's why I love Wipeout, and Wipeout does that in spades with the world building. And I don't know, I've always felt like people who don't play not people who don't play, that doesn't make any sense. People who play other games and racing games always talk about the stories in their games and whatnot, and then in other genres. And I just always wondered why the games that I like to play, why racing games couldn't benefit from that. Ridge Racer was always an example of how you could do it properly. So
I think it's just the level of imagination that the tiny tidbits of information they put in that really appeal, because we talked about being children playing Ridge Racer and like that kind of making you want to create racetracks, and then even when you're older and that kind of like early 20s teens phase, like it still appealed to you because you were starting to care about the backstory and lore. It's actually pretty impressive that's a clear kind of progression almost.
Yeah, because it's just something that like keeps coming back and keeps rewarding you as a fan of the series, and that's nice. I would like to be rewarded now, but they haven't made the new one since 2011.
Yeah. That Switch one's there somewhere, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So, memory of Ridge Racer 7. So as I was saying, one of the last thing you unlock in this game is Seaside 765, and driving that track in this game, unlocking it and driving it, felt like playing a cinematic from like one of the first games in the series. I mean, Ridge Racer, the first Ridge Racer and Ridge Racer Revolution, they didn't have like opening cinematics, but Ridge Racer did and R4 did. And I know that track did not appear in those games, but it was like it's one of the few moments that I can think of where in that moment when I was playing the game, when I was driving 765 Ridge Racer 7, I was thinking, when I was a child, I imagined what this would look like one day when they could make it. What if this track was real? I mean, every generation I'd be like, graphics can possibly look better than this, and then they did. But like, I would think about like, what if this was a real place? And like 765 made me feel that way. It made me feel like, oh my god, this looks like the opening cinematics of all of the Ridge Racer games I love, except I'm playing it, like I'm living in it. And like, that was it was like a really just like jaw-dropping experience, like a weirdly moving experience to have.
No, I think that's a fantastic memory, because like I think we all felt the same scene. Like the way they reveal 765 as well, really throw it in your face. It's very much at the end of the game, and they know exactly what kind of moment they're building up to when they finally let you race on.
Yeah, it's a very well paced game too, and the decision to hold 765 till the end is brilliant. Even though, I mean, obviously that would have been the first track I went to if I could, but they knew what they were doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, for my memory, it's actually a pretty funny one, because I remember I was playing the game with some friends and unlocked the Tarazi Wild Gang. And they were like, everybody was just kind of laughing at it, of course. And then the more I played the game, the more I realised how much you could upgrade all the cars. And then I was like, holy shit, I am going to beat the main game with this car alone. And that was it. Like, holy crap. One of my like most proud gaming achievements, really, because when you get to that end game and those final championships, it's horribly outclassed.
Oh yeah.
But like, managed to win on like a points total, and it was like separated by 1-2 points at the end, and oh man, I was just so happy that I managed to do it. And it all started just because I'm making some jokes about how ridiculous this fake Feet 500 looked.
Little do they know that you are so good at these games that you're such a pro MLG player that you're able to beat the game with that car.
That's it, man.
I forgot the Wild Gang. When you said Wild Gang, I know what you're talking about now. You're talking about the one that looks like a Fiat 500 or Nissan Micra. I was originally thinking of the one with like the the exposed wheels with the fenders.
Yeah.
I can't remember what that's called.
Oh, that's going to annoy me.
But yeah, that was something. Yeah, the idea of beating the game, though, with a car like that also brings to mind something real quick, which is just that I feel like Ridge Racer 6 was like I couldn't beat Ridge Racer 6. I felt like it was maybe made purposefully hard so that you would never beat it because that game had no content to begin with, but Ridge Racer 7 was actually like reasonable in its difficulty. So I was able to beat that game and complete it, and that made me feel really good because I don't complete a lot of games.
Yeah, it was the kind of, they really ramped up in the post game in 7, but the actual main campaign was pretty forgiving.
Yeah. So, alright, Brendan, it's been an hour. Part of me is like, I want to keep going because I'm having a really great time. Part of me is also being the very pragmatic, cruel podcast host and thinking that we could milk this for another episode.
Oh, we've got to be cruel.
Yeah, I think we've got to.
I mean, I really do think, like, there's almost 3 parts to this discussion. There's the part we've just completed, there's going to be the final part of the list, but then I think there's also that retrospective look at what Ridge Racer was, and like, I think even from the games we've discussed so far in the lower end of the list, it's clear that this is a series we hold special to our heart, and yeah, this is something that I think that our listeners, all 2 of them, will love to kind of hear us drag out almost. So I think we go down the cruelty route for this one.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like polls we could do and a listener ranking and like all of these great branding opportunities. They're just coming into, flooding my mind right now. So that's probably what we should do. Yeah, I'm running out of steam right now, so we will cut this discussion off right here, and we will pick up at a later date with numbers, I guess at this point 6 through or 5. Where are we? I gotta look here. I gotta find the right tab. Yeah, so we stop with number 6 Ridge Racer 7, and we will pick up with 5 through 1 at a later date. So definitely tune in for that.
Yep, you won't want to miss the end of this list, and I think after that pod, that'll lead us straight into our Christmas cast, which we have to start thinking about as well.
And then at that point, we won't have to have done, or we wouldn't have done a new Sega-related episode for at least a month, so that'll necessitate like 4 Dreamcast racing game coverages in one. So. Oh
yeah, I would say that's fair. 2019 can be the year of the Dreamcast.
All right, so thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon with the rest of the Ridge Racer list.
Yep, thanks everyone. See ya.